One of the things that inspired me to start this series of podcasts was issues such as the president holding up the Bible. Things like this are dividing Christians in a way that I don't think I've ever seen. Well, at least in my lifetime. I'm only 23. I've only seen a handful of presidents, but it's dividing Christians in a way that perhaps I didn't see this kind of division over many things that Obama did, other than, I guess, the obvious faith issues of gay rights and abortion and things like that. But Christians were more unified on the whole against, they had a more cohesive opinion on those issues, whereas, a lot of things Donald Trump does seems to split people right down the middle. Is that what your research is finding, that he's dividing the religious types, or do you find that no matter what he does, more people are actually standing with him no matter what?
Yeah, it's pretty complex, and there's a lot going on there. And I would say first that Donald Trump is really a fullest expression of the divisions, partly among Christians, but in American society, that's been developing for a very long time. And so part of that is the split into kind of a conservative camp and a liberal camp. That I was just reading about the decline of denominationalism in the United States. And so the United States used to be divided Protestant versus Catholic versus Jew. And eventually some of those divisions started to melt, so that the divisions really were a conservative camp that had Christians and Protestants and Catholics and Jews and whoever happened to be in that camp, versus a liberal set that had Catholics and it had Protestants and others.
Is this more as the primary thing that's dividing people? And people obviously still have these identities and labels they'll go by, but as in, would you say then politics now, in terms of conservative liberal, is becoming the main thing that people are divided by, rather than religious things? Is that what you're trying to say then, in terms of politics is the main?
That's where I'm driving. Yeah, is that it's really kind of collapsed into, if there's two kind of primary camps within religion, American religion, those pretty easily mapped onto the political party system. And so you have Republicans who are fairly dyed in the wool, and the same thing with Democrats. And they tend to eschew anything that's associated with the other party. There's not a lot of inter-party dialogue, people willing to switch parties at this point. So Donald Trump is really a full expression of that, and of course exploits it at every opportune moment. So I take issue a little bit with saying that this division is new, and I don't think that there was a lot of unity, even looking back at Barack Obama's presidency or before that. I mean, those divisions were quite deep at that point, and fairly polarized about some of those issues that you're mentioning about abortion and gay rights and other things. But the other thing that was really important in Obama's tenure, of course, was the politics of race. And I think that American religion is deeply divided about the politics of race too. So at this point, for instance, just did some research about whether people believe that Donald Trump is anointed by God.
Yes, I read a little bit. I think there was an article on your website, or one of the links you had, and I read a little bit of your write-up. But if you wouldn't mind then explaining sort of some of the findings that you were getting from that.
Yeah, sure. So not that long ago, this was early last year, 2019, some political leaders started to use this language that Donald Trump was anointed by God to be president, had a special role to play, was perhaps a modern incarnation of King Cyrus, who was not Christian, but was chosen by God in their estimation to help Christians, to protect Christians. So anyway, there was a number of different ways of conceptualizing this, but the idea was that God had chosen Donald Trump, perhaps the imperfect vessel that he was, but he was here to protect Christians against a growing threat. So people like the former Governor Rick Perry were using this. Paula White, who's a very famous Pentecostal preacher, she has her own TV show, very large congregation in Florida. She was using this language, and others were. And so we were really curious if this was starting to penetrate into the public. In early 2019, we found about 20% of Americans and about 50% of Pentecostal believers thought that he was anointed by God. And we did the survey again in 2020 and found that had really increased. So upwards of 50% of frequently attending believers of any kind believe that Donald Trump was anointed by God. We also asked if all presidents were anointed by God, because the general idea here is that they believe that God is active in the world, that everything is flowing according to God's plan, God is in charge, this sort of thing. And that, of course, logically means that all presidents are part of God's plan. But it was much lower when we suggested that Barack Obama was anointed too. So, I mean, part of that's party, but the other part is difficulty swallowing that a black man could be anointed by God to be their president. So
Okay, so you think race played a part in that anointing?
quite a bit.
Okay.
Quite a bit. There's a variety of new books that are coming out. One by Robbie Jones of PRRI. If you can, I think you should check that out. It should be out pretty soon. But just talking about the deep racial divisions that have been in place in American religion over a very long time now.
Okay,
and so that continues to play out now.
Yeah, I would have thought. I mean, I guess not being an American, I don't know as much as someone that's steeped in that culture, but I would have assumed the opposition to Obama, as well as race, which may have played a part. I would have assumed that it would have been on political grounds, and I've heard a lot of people at the time saying, "Oh, that's the Westboro Baptist Church kind of thing of Obama's the Antichrist, and he's come to ruin America. He's come, he's going to seek a third term, and then we'll know he's, So these are the things that were coming out. But then, I guess, you don't hear the same people then coming out against anything that Donald Trump has done. That's, you could argue a lot of things he's done are very much against biblical values. So it's definitely, I mean, it's an interesting thought to think that race would have played more of a part than I would have assumed in that. It's definitely an interesting thought. I wouldn't have assumed that race would have had as big an impact as you were saying.
Well, you can pivot and think about really any sort of minority group or unrepresented group in politics. And so one interesting little anecdote that's popping up now is if you go to Trump rallies, you'll find plenty of paraphernalia, T-shirts and hats and flags and whatever that still references Hillary Clinton, but almost none of it at this point talks about Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And what's part of it is probably just an overstock. They have a lot of things that they need to move still before they pivot. But perhaps the other side of this too is that, Joe Biden's a white guy and Hillary Clinton was not a white guy. And certainly Barack Obama is not a white guy.